Some women run to find love. Lydia Moore ran through fire just to live. It was 1873 in the Texas Hill Country, with gunshots echoing at dusk and flames licking at her feet. She made a choice that night. The man who thought he owned her lay dead in a burning wagon, and his partners were closing in fast. In the smoke and chaos, Lydia stumbled onto a stranger's porch and into the arms of a man who would show her what a true home was. Now, wherever you are listening from, tell me your city in the comments. I want to see just how far Lydia's story can reach. If you stick with me, you will find out why the most powerful thing a woman can do is finally stop running. First came the smoke, black against the sunset. Then came the heat and the sound of hungry voices cutting through the crackle of fire. Lydia Moore ran on bare feet, the bottom of her dress torn and bloody. She did not know if the blood on her arms was hers or his. Behind her, the wagon was nothing but a skeleton of fire. Inside that fire was Marcus Talbot, the man who had been her husband for 47 days. 47 too many. She refused to look back. Looking back was a good way for a woman to die out here. The hill country rolled out before her, looking soft from a distance but sharp enough to cut you up close. She ran away from it all, away from Marcus, away from the three men who met him at the crossroads, ready to trade cash for a woman in chains. A gunshot split the air. Lydia threw herself sideways against a juniper tree out of pure instinct. The bullet was not for her. Not yet. It was a warning telling her they were still coming. Her throat felt raw. How long had she been running? Time had lost all meaning, measured only by the distance she could put between herself and death. The brush grew thicker, and mesquite thorns tore at her arms and legs. The voices behind her got louder as the men spread out to trap her. "She can't be far," one of them yelled. "Check the wash. I want her alive. She is worth double what Talbot owed us." Worth, the word tasted like poison. Lydia had come to San Antonio on a train, holding a letter that promised marriage to a man she had never seen. She quickly learned what her worth was when Marcus told her he'd found a better deal. "You will fetch a fine price in Mexico," he had said, calm as could be. "More than enough to pay my debts." She waited until he was drunk and his partners were busy arguing. That was when she grabbed the rifle propped against the wagon wheel. She swung it hard enough to crack bone, and Marcus went down for good. The rifle fired in the struggle, hitting the whiskey-soaked blankets and setting the whole wagon ablaze. After that, there was only fire, screaming, and Lydia running for her life. Now the land started to rise, rocky and rough, forcing her to slow down. Her legs shook from exhaustion, and her feet left bloody prints on the pale stone. Ahead, two ridges formed a natural path between them. It looked like a trap, but it was her only way forward. She plunged into the narrow passage. The air cooled under the tall oak trees that blocked out the last of the daylight. Her breath came in ragged sobs. She steadied herself against a rock wall, leaving a bloody handprint, and that is when she saw it. At the end of the corridor stood a house. It was not a big place, just a simple ranch house made of wood and stone. A soft light glowed from the windows. It could mean safety, or it could mean a different kind of danger. Lydia had no choice. Behind her, the voices of the men echoed off the rock walls. They were on horseback now. They would catch her in minutes if she kept running. She stumbled toward the house, which seemed impossibly far away. 10 yards. Her foot caught on a tree root, and she fell hard, knocking the wind from her lungs. For a moment, she lay there in the dirt, wondering if this was the end. But the same stubborn fire that made her fight in the first place forced her to get up one last time. She crawled up the weathered porch steps on her hands and knees. She reached the top and collapsed against the door, pounding her fist against the wood. The door opened. Lydia fell forward onto the floor. Through a tangle of hair, she looked up and saw a man. He was tall and broad, wearing simple work clothes. His face was weathered by the sun, with deep lines around his eyes. He looked to be about 40 years old, maybe older. It is hard to tell with men who live and work alone on the land. He did not speak or move. He just stood there, looking down at her with quiet eyes, taking in her torn dress, her bloody feet, and her desperate, gasping breaths. From behind her, the sound of horse and angry men drifted on the wind. They were so close now. The man's gaze shot past her, out into the darkness between the ridges. His jaw tightened. He looked back down at Lydia, and you could see he had made up his mind. He bent down, hooked his hands under her arms, and lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. He half carried her inside the small house. The door shut behind them with a solid final sound. He set her down on a wooden chair at a simple table. The room was a bachelor's cabin where everything happened in one space. The man moved to the window not to look, but to listen. He stood as still as a predator sizing up a threat. Outside, the hoofbeats stopped. Lydia's heart hammered against her ribs. Through the window, she could see the shadows of the three riders searching the area. The man at the window did not move, did not even reach for the rifle that was leaning beside the door. He just stood there, patient as a stone, while the riders circled and called out to each other. "You see anything?" one yelled. "Nothing," another called back. "The trail goes cold at the rocks." "She's got to be in there somewhere. Check that barn." Lydia flinched, her hands gripping the wood table. The man at the window, Caleb, didn't look at her, but he knew she was there. He just raised a hand, a clear signal to stay put and be quiet. Outside, footsteps crunched on the gravel path. The barn door groaned open. She could hear the horses shifting inside. A voice called out, "Nothing but his animals." Another man grumbled, "Caleb Holt don't take to nighttime visitors. Let's just go." "Your boss is gone," the first voice said. "We saw that wagon. Whatever happened, he is finished." Lydia could finally see Caleb clearly, standing still as a statue by the window. The only sign he was alive was the tension in his broad shoulders. At last, a man outside spoke up again. "We will come back tomorrow in the daylight. I am not picking a fight with Caleb Holt in the pitch black, and neither are you if you have any sense." The sound of horses faded away into the night. Only when the world was filled with the sound of crickets did Caleb finally move. He walked to the stove, poured hot water into a basin, and set it right in front of her. He laid a clean cloth beside the water without a single word. Lydia's hands were shaking so hard she thought she might spill the whole thing. "Clean yourself up," Caleb said. His voice was rough, like an old dusty road. "Then we can talk." He turned away to give her some space and got busy at the stove. Lydia watched his back, wondering what kind of man brings a bleeding woman into his house and then starts making coffee like it is just another Tuesday evening. She dipped the cloth in the warm water, and it turned red as she cleaned her face and arms. When she was done, he set a plate in front of her. It was simple food, beans, bacon, and a piece of cornbread. He poured her a cup of coffee, black and strong. "Eat," he said. It was not a question. The first bite tasted like ash, but the second tasted like heaven. She ate like a wolf while he just leaned against the counter, watching her quietly. When her plate was clean, she finally met his gaze. "They will come back," she said, her voice hoarse. "I know." "They think I am property," she whispered. "The man who died, Marcus Talbot. He was going to sell me, so I killed him to get away." Caleb's face did not change one bit. "Does it matter how he died?" she asked. "Not to me," he said. The simple truth of that hit her hard. "Those men," she went on, "they think I am just unfinished business. But I am not." The word came out like a spark. "I came out here from Pennsylvania, a mail-order bride. Marcus lied in his letters. He wanted a worker, not a wife. When I was not good enough, he decided to sell me." Caleb just took a slow sip of his coffee. "Now I have got nothing, no money, no family. If those men catch me, no one will help." The coffee in her hands was cold now. "I do not expect you to help me. You have already done so much." Caleb pushed off from the counter. "You are too hurt and tired to run anymore tonight. You will not make it a mile." He walked over to a trunk in the corner. "You can sleep in the bed. I will take the floor." The offer was so plain and honest, it took her breath away. "I cannot ask you to do that." "You did not ask," he said simply. "I am telling you what your choices are." She looked at this quiet man who fed her and offered her a safe place with armed men looking for her right outside. There was always a catch. "Why have I?" she had to ask. "Why are you helping me?" He spread an old quilt on the floor. "Because you showed up here. Because those men think they have a right to own somebody. And because I have got the room and you need it." He looked her straight in the eye. "Is that reason enough for you?" Lydia looked at the door, then at the soft bed, and then back at this stranger. Everything she had learned from Marcus Talbot screamed that this was some kind of trap. Kindness always came with a price tag. You said I could sleep on the porch, she said in a small voice. I did, Caleb replied. You should choose whatever feels safest to you. Either way, it does not change where I sleep. In that moment, looking at his calm face, she made a choice. She would trust him. Caleb's eyes were not calculating. They were patient, like a man who understands that trust grows slow, like a hardy oak. Lydia heard herself agree to the bed. He dimmed the lamp until the room was in a soft glow. Then he laid his own quilt by the stove and settled down, a man used to making do. Lydia lay on the bed in her clothes. The relief of the mattress was so deep it brought tears to her eyes. The blanket smelled like soap and cedar. It smelled like safety. Across the room, Caleb's breathing was already deep and steady. He was a wall between her and the door, between her and the whole world outside. For the first time in 47 days, Lydia Moore slept without fear. She woke to morning light and the smell of coffee. Caleb was moving quietly in the kitchen, his quilt already folded away. Outside, the sun was rising over the hill country. The men who were hunting her had not come back, but she knew they would. Lydia sat up, her whole body aching. Her feet were full of cactus spines, and her hands were covered in scabs. She looked like she had tangled with a wildcat and lost. Caleb spoke without turning. Coffee is ready. Biscuits will be done in 10 minutes. Lydia stood and pain shot up her legs, but it was a pain she could handle. In the daylight, with a roof over her head, everything felt bearable. Thank you for last night, she said. Caleb cracked eggs into a hot skillet. You already said that, twice, he told her. Lydia felt the corner of her mouth twitch, almost a smile. What happens now, she asked. Now we eat, he said. Then I have fences to mend. You can stay or you can go. He put the food on the table. But if you stay, you are going to need some boots. She understood his offer then. It was not charity. It was work, a purpose. I can work, she said. I am strong. He nodded. A woman who runs through fire to get away is not weak. They ate without talking. It was a comfortable quiet. Outside, a mockingbird sang. Lydia thought about the men who were looking for her. Let them come, she thought. Let them try for him. For the first time since she got to Texas, she was not running anymore. She was making a stand. The man across the table gave a small, slow nod, like he knew exactly what she was thinking. Finish your coffee, Caleb said, clearing the plates. Daylight is wasting. Lydia drank the last of it. The hot coffee felt like courage in her chest. She stood up and followed him. The open door was not an escape anymore. It felt like a new beginning, a threshold into a life she might just choose for herself. The boots Caleb gave her were old and too big. Lydia stuffed the toes with cloth and laced them up tight. They felt solid, protective. They will do, she said. Caleb stood at the door, his face carved by the morning light. He glanced at her boots, then back at her face. A hint of approval showed in his eyes. Stock first, he said. Then we will see what you are made of. The ranch was a simple, solid place. It was built by a man who knew what it took to survive out here. In the barn, 3 horses stood in their stalls. Caleb pointed them out. That is Granite. The paint is Magpie. The sorrel does not have a name yet. I just call him Horse. It worked. Caleb handed her a pitchfork. Muck out the stalls. The wheelbarrow is outside. Put the pile on the garden. He did not wait for an answer. He just started checking the gray horse's hooves. Lydia set to work. The labor was hard and honest. It felt good to turn a mess into something clean. Her muscles burned, but it was a clean pain, not like the fear she had lived with for so long. By the time she finished, the sun was high and hot. Her hands had new blisters, but the stalls were clean. Caleb led the saddled horse out of the barn. He looked at her work and then at her. You will do, he said. Those 2 words meant more than any promise a man had ever given her. What is next, she asked. We have a fence down in the north pasture. We need to ride out and see the damage. He nodded toward the paint mare's stall. You know how to ride? It has been a long time, she said, but it comes back. Caleb waited while she saddled the mare. They rode out together under the big Texas sky. That old leather saddle felt heavier than lead. Lydia's arms trembled as she heaved it onto the horse's back. While she fumbled with the straps, the man named Caleb watched, saying nothing. Getting on was even harder, but she managed. Stay close, was all he said, his voice low and steady. They rode north into a wide open country of rolling grass and scattered oaks. It was a hard, honest land, and Lydia focused on just one thing, staying in the saddle and not thinking about the men who were surely coming back for her. After about 20 minutes, Caleb stopped at a broken-down section of fence. The wire sagged to the ground, held up by 3 rotted posts. "We will need new cedar posts," he said, more to himself than to her. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket and started sketching. "This is a 2-day job, maybe 3. Can't leave it. Cattle will wander off." Lydia slid down from her horse, her legs shaky. "What can I do to help?" she asked. Caleb handed her the notebook. "Hold this. You write down the measurements as I call them out." For the next hour, they worked together under the hot sun. He measured and planned while she wrote everything down in neat columns. There was a simple piece in the work, a problem with a clear solution. When they finished, Caleb looked at her handwriting. "You write well?" Lydia explained, "My mother made sure I finished the 8th grade." He nodded. She was smart. Most folks out here can't read or write. It means you can help with the ranch's books if you decide to stay on for a while. The offer hung in the air between them, a kindness she was not used to. "I have to tell you," Lydia said, her voice quiet. "Those men will come back. They have forged papers saying they have a legal claim on me." Caleb looked at her, his gaze steady. "The law is one thing. What is right is another. Right does not always win." He paused for a moment. "But it is always worth standing up for. We will handle it when it comes. For now, we have work to do." Back at the ranch, they ate a quiet lunch of cold biscuits and bacon. They were both too tired to sit down. "You should rest," Caleb told her about. "There is still afternoon work to do." He listed the chores, weeding the garden, feeding the chickens, and starting supper. "I will be out cutting lumber for those fence posts," he said as he put on his hat. Lydia realized he was giving her the house to herself. He was giving her space to think, to make her own choice about staying. Just as he reached the door, she called out his name. "Caleb?" He paused and turned. "Thank you, not for the shelter, but for treating me like I have a choice, Bermaz." A small, rare smile touched his lips. "Everyone has choices, Lydia, even when it does not feel like it." Then he was gone. She stood in the quiet kitchen, feeling a change deep inside her. For the first time in a long, long time, she was starting to feel like a person again, not just someone's property. The afternoon passed in a blur of simple tasks. Lydia pulled weeds, collected warm eggs from the chicken coop, and mended her dress. Each small chore felt like she was rebuilding a life. But as the sun began to set, she heard hoofbeats coming from the south. Through the window, she saw them. 3 riders. It was the same men from before. Her heart pounded in her chest. Caleb was still out somewhere, too far away to help. The riders stopped in the yard. The one in front, a man with a mean-looking scar on his face, called out, "We are looking for Caleb Holt." Lydia stood perfectly still, hidden inside the house. Every part of her wanted to run, but she knew running had only delayed this moment. "I know you are in there, girl," the scarred man yelled. "Come on out and we can talk." Lydia's mind raced, searching for a way out of this trap. Then a calm voice cut through the evening air. "State your business." Caleb walked out from behind the barn. He was not hurrying. He just walked toward the riders as if they were nothing more than a minor interruption. The scarred man, whose name was Garrett, leaned down from his saddle. "We are looking for a woman. She murdered her husband and fled. We have a warrant to bring her in." Caleb just looked at him. "Is that so?" "It is a legal warrant." A warrant from the magistrate in San Antonio," Garrett insisted. Caleb crossed his arms. "Well then, let me see it." Garrett's jaw tightened. "I do not have it on me. It is filed with the sheriff back in town." Caleb shook his head slowly. "Then I reckon we have nothing more to talk about. You are on my land without a warrant and without an invitation. I am asking you to leave." Garrett's face turned ugly. "We are not looking for trouble, Holt, but we are not leaving without her." Caleb did not move. He just stared them down. "You have no proof, no warrant, and no claim. All you have is a made-up story. You boys are bounty hunters trying to collect on a lie." He took one step forward. "Now get off my property." The 3 men looked at Caleb's steady eyes and saw he was not bluffing. They muttered to each other, turned their horses, and rode away in a cloud of dust. Lydia watched them go, finally letting out a long, shaky breath. Caleb came back inside. He looked at her and gave a small nod. Looks like you made your choice to stay. And in that quiet moment, Lydia knew she was finally home. The air went still, and even the horses felt it. When a man named Garrett let his hand drift toward his rifle, Lydia felt a cold dread. But Caleb's voice cut through the quiet, low and steady. I have been on this land for 12 years. I know my neighbors, and they know me. You three are strangers, making trouble on my property without a lick of proof. He let that hang in the air. Now you can leave quiet-like, or you can do something you will regret. For a long second, Garrett's face twisted up, but then he slowly took his hand back. This ain't over. We will be back with the sheriff. Caleb just nodded. Then you will have the law on your side. Until then, you are just trespassing. Good evening, gentlemen. Garrett spat on the ground, turned his horse, and rode off in a cloud of dust. Caleb watched them go, then walked back to the house. Lydia was inside, pale and shaking. Their eyes met, and in that quiet moment, they both understood the risk he had just taken for her. They will be back, Lydia whispered. Maybe, Caleb said, hanging his hat by the door. You could have just given me to them. It would have been easier. Easier is not always right, he said, building up the fire in the stove. What you did was not murder. It was survival. Any good lawman would see that. The law does not always see things clearly, especially for a woman. I know, he said, his hands moving with purpose, but that don't mean we give up. Lydia sank into a chair, the fight draining out of her. Why are you helping me? You do not owe me a thing. Caleb looked over his shoulder. You asked what happens next. Well, here it is. You stay here as long as you need. You help with the work, you eat at my table, and you sleep under my roof. That is the deal. Plain and simple. It is only simple if we make it that way, he said as the fire caught hold. For the first time in a long time, Lydia felt a little bit of the tightness in her shoulders begin to ease. I can cook, she said after a moment. Let me make supper. Caleb stepped aside and she got to work. She found potatoes and onions and some deer meat, and soon the little cabin filled with the comforting smell of a hot meal. They worked together in a comfortable quiet. When they sat down to eat, it did not feel like charity. It felt like a partnership. Tell me about this ranch, she said. Bought the land 12 years ago, Caleb said. Built the house and the barn myself. It is not much, but it is all mine. Do you run it all by yourself? Mostly, he said. It is a lot of work for one person. It is, he agreed, meeting her gaze across the table. It would be less work with two. The words just sat there in the air between them, a simple statement of fact. I do not know how long I can stay, she said. Those men will not give up. When they bring the law, we will tell them the truth, Caleb said. We will tell them Marcus Talbot was a criminal, and you acted in self-defense. What witnesses do we have? There is you, and now there is me, he said, pushing his plate back. You tell me your truth, and I will stand by it. You would lie for me? It is not a lie if it is the truth, he said, his eyes steady. Is it the truth? Yes. Then that is our story. For now, we work, he said as they cleared the table. We let them make the next move, and we will be ready. As they washed the dishes together, Lydia thought about her choices. Running had only led to more trouble. Maybe staying put was the bravest thing she could do. Later, Caleb brought out an old ledger book. If you are good with numbers, you can help me with this mess. Lydia opened the book. It was a jumble of figures and notes. This is a mess, she said with a small smile. I know, he admitted. I am better with cattle than with books. I can fix this, she told him, pulling the book closer. For the next 2 hours, they sat together in the warm quiet of the cabin. She organized his numbers while he mended a bridle. It felt peaceful. It felt almost like home. When her eyes grew tired, Caleb stood up. Same as last night. The bed is yours. She looked at the man who had faced down armed riders for her, who offered her work instead of pity. Trust was a hard thing to come by, but maybe it was a choice you had to make. The bed, she said quietly. He nodded, then turned down the lamp and settled on his quilt by the door, giving her some privacy. He stayed right there, a quiet guardian between her and the dark. And for the second night in a row, Lydia slept without fear. The days that followed found their own rhythm. They worked from sunup to sundown, building a life from the ground up. Lydia ran the house and the books, which showed the ranch was doing better than it looked. Caleb tended the land and the animals. They did not talk much, but in the shared work and quiet evenings, A slow and steady trust began to grow between them. He handed her a pair of old leather gloves, said they were for the fence work. Her hands still got blisters, but the simple gesture meant the world. It showed she was becoming part of the place. A few days later, they rode out to move cattle. Lydia felt strong on her horse, Magpie. When a young steer made a break for it, she turned him back to the herd without even thinking. She had a knack for it she had forgotten, Caleb noticed. You know your way around cattle, he said when they were done. My uncle had a farm, she explained. I spent summers there. It felt like another lifetime. Well, it is coming back to you, he said. Lydia looked at the peaceful herd. I forgot what it felt like to be good at something. Caleb just nodded. By the end of the week, Lydia had the place running smoother than it had in years. She even sorted out his account books. She was getting stronger, and the fear that followed her was starting to fade. But she knew the quiet would not last. On the 8th day, she was weeding the garden when she heard them. 2 horses coming from the east. It was not a gallop, but it was not a friendly visit either. Her blood ran cold. Caleb came out of the barn, shielding his eyes. The riders came into view. One was Garrett, the man with the scars. The other wore a sheriff's star. Lydia stood up and walked toward the house. She wanted to run, but she knew that would only make things worse. Caleb met the riders before they got to the yard. He stood in a way that was calm but firm. The sheriff spoke first. Caleb Holcomb, I am Sheriff Morrison. This here is Garrett. We need to ask about a woman named Lydia Talbot. She is wanted for the death of her husband, Marcus. The sheriff's eyes scanned the property and landed right on Lydia. Is that her? Caleb did not turn around. I believe you mentioned a warrant. I would like to see it. Morrison handed over the folded paper. Caleb took his time reading it. Lydia held her breath. Finally, he folded it and handed it back. This warrant says Lydia Talbot murdered her husband and burned his property. It is based on the word of 3 men, including Garrett here. That is right, said the sheriff. Caleb's voice was steady. It does not mention that Marcus Talbot was trying to sell his wife to these men. It does not say she ran to save her life. Morrison's face hardened. That is her side of the story. It is the truth that should have been looked into before you came all the way out here, Caleb replied. The law says I take her in for questioning. A judge will sort it out. The sheriff pushed. So I will ask you plain, is that Lydia Talbot on your porch? The world seemed to stop. Lydia felt trapped, but she had promised Caleb her trust. That meant she had to stand her ground. That is Lydia Moore, Caleb said, his voice like solid rock. She has been working for me this past week. Garrett leaned forward. Same woman. She told you she was married to Marcus Talbot. She told me Marcus Talbot tried to sell her to bounty hunters. Caleb corrected him. She told me she fought back to save her own life. Caleb looked straight at the sheriff. Those facts change things, do they not? They would have to be proven. Then prove them, Caleb said. But you will do it here on my land. Miss Moore is under my protection. Morrison rubbed his jaw. He was thinking it over. You are making this complicated, Holcomb. No, Caleb said. I am making it fair. The sheriff sighed. You are a respected man, Holcomb. So here is my offer. Let me question Miss Moore right here. I will take her statement or back to the judge before I decide to make an arrest. Caleb finally turned to Lydia. His eyes asked if she was all right with that. She gave him a tiny nod. Fair enough, Caleb told the sheriff. But I will be here for the whole thing. Morrison got off his horse. Miss Moore, if you would. Lydia walked to Caleb's side. He stood just a little in front of her, a silent shield. The sheriff took out a small notebook. State your full name. Lydia Ann Moore. And Marcus Talbot was your husband? No, she said. Marcus Talbot used fake papers to claim he was my husband. There was no marriage. It was all a lie. Tell me what happened the night he died, the sheriff said gently. Lydia took a deep breath. He took me to a crossroads where Garrett and 2 other men were waiting. He said they would pay good money for me. Garrett yelled, That is a lie. The sheriff silenced him with a look. I refused, Lydia continued. Marcus got violent. We fought and I grabbed his rifle. It went off during the struggle and started a fire. So I ran. Did you hit him with it? Yes, hard enough to stop him from putting me in chains. I do not know if that is what killed him or if it was the fire, but I will not apologize for refusing to be sold. Morrison wrote for a long moment. Then he looked up at Garrett. You got a bill of sale for this woman? Any proof at all? Garrett's jaw was tight, so the proof burned up with the wagon. Mighty convenient. Sheriff Morrison turned back to Lydia. Ma'am, you got any proof? Letters? People who saw something? I have the advertisement promising a home and marriage, she said. I have my train ticket. And I have Mr. Holt, who knows I've only been defending myself. Trafficked is a heavy accusation, Morrison said. It is the right word, Caleb cut in. When men try to sell a woman, that is what you call it. Morrison slowly closed his notebook. Well, folks, this is a real mess. The warrants are legal, but Miss Moore here makes a good point. Without Garrett's papers, it is just his word against hers. Then you need to judge a person's character, Caleb said. I have only known Garrett about 10 days, but I have known myself my whole life. Miss Moore has worked hard and caused no trouble. So who are you going to believe? A man chasing money or a woman fighting for her life? Morrison put his notebook away. This is for Judge Blackwell to sort out. In the meantime, he said, looking at Lydia, I need you to stay in Gillespie County. Can you do that? She can, Caleb answered for her. She works for me. She is not going anywhere. Is that fine with you, Miss Moore? Lydia looked right at the sheriff. Yes, Sheriff, that is fine with me. I will be in touch inside of a week. The judge will want a hearing, Morrison said. Until then, both of you stay out of trouble. He gave Garrett a hard look. Garrett looked like he was about to explode, but Morrison was already turning his horse. Garrett had no choice but to follow, and they rode off. Lydia's legs finally gave out from under her. She dropped onto the porch steps, her hands shaking something fierce. Caleb sat down near her, his presence a comfort. Well, he said softly, that could have gone a whole lot worse. Worse? Lydia's laugh was shaky. He left me here waiting for a judge to decide if I'm a killer or not. But he did not arrest you, Caleb pointed out, and he is making Garrett prove his side of the story. That is more than most women in your spot would get. Morrison is a fair man. He paused. If the judge sides with Garrett, we will handle it then. But that is a worry for another day. He stood up and offered her his hand. Today, we have fence posts to set. Lydia took his hand and let him help her up. His steady grip was proof she was not in this alone. How can you be so calm, she asked. Worrying does not mend fences, he said simply. You told the truth, that matters. And I am standing with you. That matters too. But why? The question just tumbled out. Why risk everything for me? Caleb was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the hills. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and heavy. I had a wife. Her name was Sarah. She died 7 years ago, giving birth to our daughter. The baby only lived 3 days longer. Lydia felt her chest tighten. The whole time, Caleb went on, all I could think was that I should have done more to protect them. I could not save my family, Lydia, but I can stand with you. I can give you a choice they never had. I can be the kind of man who does not turn away. He met her eyes. Is that reason enough for you? Yes, Lydia whispered. That is reason enough. They spent the afternoon fixing the fence. The silence between them was different now, filled with a new understanding. Caleb showed her how to set the post deep in the rocky soil. The hard work was good for her, pushing the fear away. By sunset, the fence line was straight and strong again. Looking at their work, Lydia felt a deep satisfaction. She could build things, not just survive them. Good work, Caleb said, checking the wire. You have a knack for it. I had a good teacher, she replied. Back at the ranch, they fell into an easy routine with the horses. Over a stew supper, they talked about ranch business, like two partners building a life. But they were not partners, she reminded herself. She was still a wanted woman. Caleb was a man offering shelter, not a future. Yet as they cleaned up, she wondered if the distinction mattered so much. A partnership built on work and trust might be the strongest kind. I have been thinking, Caleb said, breaking the silence. At the hearing, you will need more than just our word. A judge needs to see you have standing in this community. I do not have that, she said quietly. Not yet, he replied. But you could. He chose his words carefully. If you were married to a man the judge respects, it would make him see you differently. Lydia stopped, her hands in the dishwater. What are you saying? I am saying we could get married, he said, plain and simple. Proper and legal. It would put you under the protection of my name, make you a Holt. The law would have to treat you with respect. Caleb, that is too much to ask, she breathed. Marriage is forever. You would be tied to all my trouble. I am already tied to your trouble, he said, his face serious. This just makes it official so they cannot take you from here. But marriage is a life commitment, she whispered. It is not something you do for convenience. I know that, Caleb said. I am not asking you to love me, Lydia. I am asking you to let me protect you. We would just keep on as we are, working this land together. The only thing that changes is the paperwork. And what happens when it is all over, she asked. Then you choose, he said, his voice softening. You can stay or you can go. The choice will always be yours. All I am offering is a chance. Her mind was spinning. Marrying Caleb meant safety and respect. It also meant a different kind of trap, a promise made from need instead of love. But what other choice did she have? To face that judge all alone? I need to think on it, she said at last. Take all the time you need, he answered. That night, Lydia lay in bed, staring into the moonlit dark. The word marriage had meant so many different things to her. First a dream, then a lie. And now it was a shield offered by a good and quiet man. Could she take it? She knew his survival meant you took help where you could find it. The next morning, Lydia found Caleb in the barn. She walked right up to him. He looked up from his work, and she said, I'll marry you if you still mean it. He gave a slow nod. I meant it. Then yes, she said, her voice steady, for the protection and for a place to stand. Yes, Caleb said. It was as simple as that. I'll ride into town this morning to speak with Minister Davies. We can be married on Sunday with the whole church as our witnesses. Is that enough time for you? I don't need time, she said. I just need it to be real. It will be, he promised. But you need to understand, Lydia. This marriage is legal, but it doesn't tie you to anything more. You keep your space. You make your choices. And you, she asked, what's in it for you? The corner of his mouth twitched. Some help with the ranch and the peace of mind knowing I did right by someone who needed it. It was not love, but it was honest, and honesty felt safer than any promise. Sunday then? She agreed. Caleb rode out, leaving Lydia with her spinning thoughts. She worked until she was bone-tired, scrubbing and cleaning just to keep her mind quiet. He returned late that afternoon and found her sitting in the tomato patch, dirt on her hands. It is arranged, he said simply. Sunday after the service. The Weavers will stand as our witnesses. They are good people. They run the mercantile in town, Caleb explained, helping her to her feet. Martha will want to meet you. I figured we could stop by tomorrow, and we need to get you a proper dress. Cannot have you getting married in rags. The practical thought, so very much like him, made her throat feel tight. You do not have to. I know, he said. I want to. We are doing this proper. The next day they rode into town. Every stranger on the road made Lydia flinch, but Caleb rode beside her, steady and calm. The town of Fredericksburg was a handful of stone buildings. At the mercantile, Martha Weaver, a strong woman in her 50s with kind eyes, greeted them. She took one look at Lydia and ushered her toward the back of the store, where bolts of fabric were stacked high. Caleb tells me you need a dress for Sunday, Martha said, her voice warm as she pulled down a roll of dove gray cotton. This would suit you, I think. Simple, but it has dignity. I cannot afford, Lydia started. Caleb has already settled it, Martha said gently. Now let us get your measurements. As she worked, she spoke in a low voice. He is a good man, Caleb Holt. I have known him for 12 years, and I have never once seen him bring a woman to town, let alone one he plans to marry. That means something, child, even if you two do not want to admit it yet. The dress was ready by Saturday, and it fit like a dream. It made her look less like a woman running from her past and more like one walking toward a future. When Caleb saw her, he just nodded. It is good, he said. You look like you belong here. Sunday morning was clear and bright. They rode to church in silence, Lydia in her new dress and Caleb in his good suit. They stood before the minister in the small congregation and spoke the words that bound them together. I do, Lydia said, her voice strong. I do, Caleb echoed. And just like that, Lydia Moore was gone, and Lydia Holt stood in her place. She signed the marriage certificate, making it real, making it something no man could take away. The townspeople offered their quiet congratulations, understanding that life on the frontier sometimes required practical choices. On the ride home, the world felt different. At the ranch, their ranch, Caleb helped her down from the horse with a strange formality. "Welcome home, Mrs. Holt." Lydia took his hand, and for the first time since this nightmare began, the word home felt true. That night, Caleb still slept on the floor, but the distance between them now felt like respect, not a separation between strangers. The marriage certificate sat on a kitchen shelf, a plain piece of paper holding the weight of her future. The official notice arrived on a Thursday. A deputy delivered it, tipping his hat and calling her Mrs. Holt. Judge Blackwell required their testimony the following Monday at 10 in the morning. Lydia's hands shook as she read the words. Caleb took the summons from her, his face calm. 5 days, he said. That gives us enough time. Time for what? The facts do not change. No, Caleb agreed, pouring them both some coffee. But how we present them does. We need to go over everything that happened, nice and slow. We need our stories to be straight. Tell me again what Marcus said when his men arrived. Tell me his exact words, Caleb prompted later that night. Lydia closed her eyes. He said, "This is the merchandise. She is strong and healthy, worth every penny." Caleb wrote it all down. And the other man, Garrett, what did he say? He looked at my teeth like I was a horse, she said, her voice flat. He said, "She will do, but I will only give you half now and half when we cross into Mexico." That is when I knew I had to run, or I would be gone forever. Caleb's hand rested on hers for just a second. "I know this is hard," he said, "but you are doing good. Keep going." "It will be a tough fight," Caleb said, breaking the long silence after she had told him everything. "But we have a chance. We will need character witnesses, folks who can tell the judge that you are not the criminal they say you are." "Who would do that?" she asked. "I only know Martha and Tom from the general store." "That is a start," he said. "Their word means something in this town." He paused, looking at her thoughtfully. "And the fact that you are my wife now, that will show everyone you belong here. It shows stability." She knew their marriage was for show as much as for safety. A respectable husband made her word count for something. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you," she said softly. "This ain't about debts," Caleb replied, then stopped on his way to his bedroll. "Get some sleep. Monday's going to be a tough ride." The days before the hearing were a quiet storm. Caleb showed her how to deliver a calf that was turned around wrong. Their hands worked together, and the little thing came into the world, shaky but alive. Lydia felt tears on her cheeks, not from fear, but from seeing life win a hard fight. Caleb washed his hands in the creek. "Cattle just push through," he said. "They trust and they know what to do." "Well, I'm not a cow," she answered. "No, but sometimes you just got to push through too." That Friday, Martha Weaver showed up with a food basket and a look that meant business. She hugged Lydia hard. "Tom and I are coming to the hearing," Martha said. "We'll speak for you both. Judge Blackwell knows us, and he'll listen." Lydia tried to protest. "You don't have to. It might bring you trouble." "Trouble's already at the door," Martha said, holding her steady. "Besides, I've seen too many good women hurt by bad men. It's time to stand up." That simple kindness from a neighbor nearly broke Lydia. She held herself together and thanked Martha for the coffee and the company. Later, Caleb found her on the porch as the sky turned dark. "You got good folk in your corner," he said, sitting down next to her. "That's worth a lot." "I'm not used to it. It feels like it could all just blow away." "Then you hold on to it. Let it make you strong, not scared." He was quiet a minute. "My Sarah used to say being strong just meant doing what you had to do, even when you were scared spitless. Your wife sounds like she was a smart woman. She was stubborn, that's for sure, but smart too." He said it with a fondness that was plain as day. "I think she would have liked you. She'd have seen the steel in you." "I don't feel like steel. You walked through hell and are still standing. That's steel enough for anyone." Caleb stood up and offered her his hand. "Come on, supper's not going to make itself." They moved around the small kitchen like they'd been doing it for years. It felt strange but also right, like pulling on a comfortable pair of old boots. Over the meal, they went over her story one last time. Caleb acted like a mean lawyer, asking her hard questions. He made her fight for every answer. "Why didn't you go to the law back in San Antonio?" he pushed. "Because I had no proof," she said, her voice steady. "He was a respected man, and I was a woman with nothing. Who would have taken my word over his papers?" So you just stayed? I stayed to survive, hoping I could find a way out before he sold me. And you want this court to believe a man would try to sell his own wife? Her voice went hard as iron. I expect the court to believe a woman when she tells you what a man like that will do. I expect you to look at the three men with chains waiting for me. Caleb dropped the act and nodded. Good, that's the fire they need to see. You're a survivor, not just a victim. I'm just so tired of fighting. I know, but if we do this right, it's the last big fight. After Monday, you'll be safe. You'll have a life that is truly your own. The idea felt too big to believe, but she held on to it. There was nothing else to do. Saturday, Caleb rode to town for a new shirt. They were building their defense out of clean clothes and respectability, hoping it would be enough. As the sun set, Caleb found her by the corral. You need to know, he started. This might not go our way. The judge could still rule against us. He clenched his jaw. If that happens, I won't let them take you. Not without one heck of a fight. Caleb, you can't. I mean it. We're legally married. That gives me rights. If the judge gives you to Garrett, I can file appeals. I can drag it out until folks see the truth. It could ruin me, my name in this town. And if it does, he said, his voice low and fierce, then my name wasn't worth much to begin with. I did what was right. Now I will stand by you while these folks decide if the truth still means something. Lydia looked at Caleb, truly seeing the man he was. He was shaped by loss, sure, but he was not broken. He was a man who knew doing right was a heck of a lot more important than being comfortable. Why are you really doing this? There is more to it, is not there? Caleb stared off into the distance for a good long while. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with old pain. When my Sarah was dying, I could not do a blessed thing. I just stood there, completely useless, and watched her slip away. He swallowed hard. I swore to God I would never feel that helpless again. So this is about being the kind of man who does not just stand by and watch a good person suffer. It is about being the man Sarah would have wanted me to be. She always stood up for the folks who could not. I am just trying to follow her lead. That raw honesty changed everything between them. This was not a business deal in a preacher's parlor anymore. This was two broken people trying to build something new. Thank you. Thank you, Lydia said, her voice soft, for believing I am worth the fight. You are, Caleb said, even if you do not see it yet. He touched her shoulder for just a second. Now let us get inside. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Sunday was quiet. They worked in the garden side by side, their hands moving in an easy rhythm. The work felt good, normal, but that hearing hung over them like a big Texas thunderhead. That night on the porch, watching the stars come out, Lydia spoke into the dark. Whatever happens, I want you to know this is the first real home I have had in years. This place and you, it all matters to me. Caleb found her hand in the dark and gave it a squeeze. You matter too, more than you know. Sleep did not come easy for either of them that night. Around 3 in the morning, Lydia gave up and went to the kitchen for some water. Caleb was already there, sitting at the table by a low-burning lamp. Cannot quiet your mind either, she asked. He pointed to a chair. Sit a spell, keep me company. They talked until the sun started to peek over the hills. They did not talk about the trial, but about little things, like Caleb's plans for his cattle and Lydia's memories of her mother's garden. As the first light came through the window, Caleb stood up. Time to get ready. They put on their Sunday clothes like they were armor, trying to look like solid citizens instead of two desperate people fighting for their lives. The ride into Fredericksburg felt like it took forever. You could feel the whole town buzzing with news about the hearing. The courthouse was a big stone building that looked both safe and scary at the same time. Martha and Tom Weaver were already there, waiting on the steps to give them a quiet nod of support. The courtroom was smaller than Lydia expected. Garrett and his cronies sat on one side, looking smug with their fancy lawyer. Sheriff Morrison stood in the back, his face giving nothing away. Judge Blackwell came in right at 10 o'clock. He was a silver-haired man with a weathered face who looked like he had seen it all. He sat down and got right to business. We are here to look into the charges against Lydia Holt concerning the death of Marcus Talbot. Mr. Garrett, you may present your case. Garrett's lawyer stood up and started painting a nasty picture of Lydia. He called her a cunning, ungrateful wife who murdered her husband for his property. He claimed she was a danger to everyone. He made it all sound so convincing, and every word felt like a slap in the face. Lydia sat there, stiff as a board, trying not to show a thing. Under the table, Caleb's hand found hers and squeezed, a silent reminder to just breathe. Then it was Caleb's turn. He stood tall, and even without a law degree, he spoke with a calm strength. Your Honor, what that man calls murder was self-defense. What he calls abandonment was a woman escaping a monster. And what he calls a legal marriage was nothing but a lie from the start. Caleb laid out the facts one by one. He had Martha Weaver testify to Lydia's good character. Then Tom Weaver spoke to Caleb's own solid reputation in the county. If Caleb Holt says this woman is innocent, I believe him, Tom said plainly. Finally, Caleb called Lydia to the stand. She walked up, her legs shaking but holding steady. She put her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. She looked right at the judge and told him everything. She spoke of the hope she had on the train ride west and the awful truth she found when she got there. Marcus Talbot never wanted a wife. He wanted a slave. I did not want to kill him, Lydia said, tears running down her cheeks, but her voice strong. I just wanted to live. When he tried to put me in chains, I knew if I did not fight, I would disappear forever. So I fought. I will not apologize for refusing to be sold like a piece of cattle. The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Blackwell looked at Lydia for a long time. Then he turned his hard gaze on Garrett. Mr. Garrett, you make some mighty serious claims. Can you show me the legal marriage document? It burned in the wagon, sir. Can you show me a bill of sale proving you had any right to this woman? It burned too. Can you show me any proof at all, besides the words of you and your partners who all stood to make money off her? Garrett's face turned red. The evidence was destroyed. In a fire that started while she was fighting for her freedom, the judge snapped back. What I am hearing, Mr. Garrett, is that you have got nothing, no proof, no witnesses who are not your friends, just your own greedy word. Blackwell turned back to Lydia. Mrs. Holt, I find your story to be the truth. More than that, even if everything Mr. Garrett said was true, which I doubt, you had every right to defend yourself from being sold. He looked at Garrett with pure ice in his eyes. This court does not recognize the sale of human beings. Her voice was steady, even with tears on her cheeks. I just wanted to live. When he came at me with those chains and I saw those men with money, I knew what was next. I knew I had to fight or I would just disappear across the border. So I fought. I am not sorry I refused to be sold. The courtroom went quiet. The judge looked at Lydia, then turned his gaze on Garrett. Mr. Garrett, you have made some mighty big claims. Where are the papers that say she was married to Marcus Talbot? They burned up in the wagon. And the bill of sale? Burned too. So you have no proof at all. Just your word, and the word of men who stood to gain from her capture? Garrett's face turned red. The fire destroyed it all. A fire she started while fighting for her life, the judge said, his voice like flint. Mr. Garrett, what I hear is a lot of talk and no proof. You claim this woman is property, but you have nothing to back it up. He turned back to Lydia. Mrs. Holt, your story rings true, and even if it did not, you had every right to defend yourself from being sold like livestock. He gave Garrett a cold stare. We do not sell women in this country. Trafficking, folks, is against the law here in Texas and everywhere else. If Marcus Talbot was mixed up in that business, his death was his own doing. He brought the gavel down hard. The charges against Lydia Holt are dismissed. I am also ordering a full investigation into Mr. Garrett and his whole operation. Lydia just sat there, frozen, until Caleb put a hand on her shoulder. It is over, he said softly. You are free. Martha Weaver hugged her tight, and even Sheriff Morrison tipped his hat with respect. I am mighty glad justice was served today, Mrs. Holt, the sheriff said. Mrs. Holt, a name she had earned. Garrett and his men stormed out of the courthouse, looking like they could chew nails. Outside, the sun felt warmer, full of promise. Caleb stood right there beside her, solid as an old oak tree. Thank you, she said, her voice thick. For keeping your promise, Caleb finished for her. That is what partners do. The word partners hung in the air between them, feeling heavier than it did before. They had married for protection, a business deal to survive. But standing together against all that trouble had changed things. It had made them partners for real. What comes next? Lydia asked. We go home, Caleb said, almost smiling. Fix that fence. Check on the Calvin cows. We live. Normal felt like a strange and wonderful idea. A life of hard work and open skies, not one of running and fear. A life she could finally call her own. When they got back to the ranch, Caleb helped her down from her horse. Welcome home, Mrs. Holt, he said. Free and clear. That evening, they worked side by side in the garden as the sun went down. Later, they sat on the porch watching the stars pop out in that big old Texas sky. They did not need to talk. They just shared the quiet, knowing the fight was won and their future was their own to make. Caleb, Lydia finally said into the dark, about you sleeping on the floor. That cannot be good for your back. He just said it was fine. It is not, she insisted. We are properly married now. If you wanted, well, if you wanted to share the bed like a husband and wife, I would be all right with that. The silence stretched out, and she worried she had made a terrible mistake. Then his hand found hers. Are you sure about that? I do not want you feeling like you have to. I am sure, she said. I am choosing it because I trust you, because this feels like home. She had almost said, and you feel like mine. He squeezed her hand. All right then, if you are choosing it freely, then yes. They walked into the house together side by side. That night, for the first time, Caleb did not sleep by the stove. He joined her in the bed, the space between them small but respectful. Lying in the dark, Caleb spoke. Lydia, I am glad you are mine too. She found his hand and held it tight. So am I. They fell asleep holding hands, two people whose practical bargain was becoming something real. A storm woke Lydia before dawn. The wind was howling and she felt the unfamiliar warmth of Caleb beside her. He slept with one arm across his chest, his face finally relaxed. The hard lines carved by loss had softened, and she saw the man he must have been before his world fell apart. He was the man who had pulled her from a fire, who had faced down gunmen for her, who had taught her the ways of the ranch with quiet patience. He had earned her trust, plain and simple. As if feeling her watching, his eyes opened. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then he gave her that little half smile. Storm is coming, he said, his voice husky with sleep. Cattle will need checking. Then we had better get to it, she replied. But neither one moved just yet. They finally rose and dressed in the gray light. Over hot coffee, they listened to the rain begin to drum on the roof. The sky was the color of a bruised plum, heavy with water. I will take the north pasture, Caleb said, pulling on his slicker. You check the barn in the near pasture. Move any cow that looks distressed into shelter. Lydia nodded, pulling on the sturdy coat he had bought for her without a word. The rain came down in sheets. Lydia worked through the barn, making sure everything was dry and secure. In the nearby pasture, 3 cows stood steady in the downpour. She counted them, looking for the young heifer Caleb had been worried about, the one expecting her first calf. She spotted her at the far end of the field, standing alone and looking uneasy. Lydia walked toward her slowly, speaking in a low, calm voice, just like Caleb taught her. The heifer was nervous, but she did not run. Up close, Lydia could see the signs. A calf was on its way, and soon. Easy now, girl, Lydia whispered, stroking the animal's wet neck. Let us get you inside where it is warm and dry. It was slow, hard work moving a laboring cow in a storm, but she did not rush. She just guided and encouraged until the heifer was safe in a big stall, settled on a bed of fresh straw. The heifer was soaked clear through, and rain was coming down in sheets, turning the whole yard to mud. Caleb rode in an hour later, steam rising off his horse. He swung down and led the animal into the barn, spotting the heifer right away. How long? He asked, already checking on her. About an hour. She's getting restless. Caleb ran his hands over the cow's side and nodded. Good call, bringing her in. A little longer in that rain and we would have lost them both. He took off his wet coat. You did good. That simple praise warmed Lydia more than the dry barn. They settled in to wait. They knew that first-time mothers often need a hand. Outside, the storm crashed and thunder rolled like cannon fire. Inside the barn, time just seemed to stretch and stand still all at once. Tell me about Sarah, Lydia said softly, breaking the quiet. Only if you want to. Caleb was quiet for a long while. Then he started to talk, his voice low and steady. He spoke of a woman who was strong and stubborn, who laughed from the belly and worked harder than any man. She had wanted a big family, saying a ranch was not complete without the sound of kids running around. When she got pregnant, she was the happiest I ever saw her, he said, his hands going still. She talked to that baby like it was already born. What happened? Lydia asked gently. Came too early. It was a bad birth. Caleb's jaw was tight. Sarah, she lost too much blood. She got to hold our little girl for about 10 minutes, asked me to name her Rose, and then she was gone. He took a ragged breath. The baby had only made it 3 more days. Lydia reached out and took his hand. I am so sorry, Caleb. It was 7 years ago, he said, but when I saw you on my porch, all hurt and desperate, he looked right at her, his eyes full of emotion. I saw a second chance, not to replace Sarah, but to be the kind of man who helps folks when he can. You did more than help, she whispered. You gave me a life. We gave each other one. The heifer's labor got harder, and Caleb moved in to help. His hands were gentle and sure as he guided the calf into the world. It came out in a rush, small and still. For one long, awful second, there was nothing. Then Caleb cleared its mouth and rubbed it hard with straw. The calf coughed, took a breath, and tried to move its wobbly legs. The new mother started cleaning her baby. Caleb and Lydia stepped back, both of them smiling. A bull calf, Caleb said. He's a strong one. What are you going to name him? Don't usually name them. They're stock. He watched the little calf finally get to its feet. But this one, Hastay, he's the first one born since you came. He nodded. All right, we'll call him Lucky, because that is what he is. They stayed until the mother and calf were steady, then ran through the rain back to the house. Inside, they hung up their wet coats and shivered by the stove. Hot food, Caleb said, already pulling out a pot. Then dry clothes. Lydia took over the cooking while he went to change. The simple act of making a meal together felt different now. It felt like they were building something real. Over a bowl of stew, they talked about the ranch, about which fences needed mending and what to do if the rain kept up. It was the easy kind of talk that weaves 2 lives into one. I have been thinking, Caleb said after dinner, about buying that Henderson place to the south. We could handle a bigger herd now with the 2 of us. He looked at her carefully. That is, if you are planning on staying. Lydia put down the dish she was drying. You have choices now that you are free. You could go anywhere you want. I already made my choice, she said, turning to face him. I chose to marry you, and I chose to stay. I am not here because I have nowhere else to be, Caleb. I am here because this is where I want to be, with you. A look of relief washed over his face. I needed to hear you say it. I needed to know you were not just settling. What I want, she said, stepping closer, is to plant a garden and watch it grow. I want to sit on this porch with you when we are old and gray. She put her hand on his chest, right over his heart. I want you, Caleb Holt. Just you. He covered her hand with his. I want you too. I just did not know how to say it without it sounding like I was asking for payment. You was just patient. You let me find my way. And what's growing, he asked. Love, Lydia said, plain and simple. The real kind that's built on trust and hard work. Caleb pulled her close and kissed her, gentle and sure. It wasn't like their wedding kiss, all stiff and proper. This was a real beginning. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead on hers. I'm not a man for pretty words, but I can show you every day that you matter, that we matter. That's all I need, she whispered. Showing up is the hard part. That evening, Caleb tallied up ranch accounts while Lydia sat mending, their chairs close enough for their knees to brush. The rain drumming on the roof made the whole world feel 1,000 miles away. They went to bed later, a comfortable silence between them, their bodies finding a natural closeness in the dark. In the quiet after, Lydia spoke into the darkness. Thank you, Caleb, for letting me choose, for never making me feel like I owed you a thing. A man is supposed to be decent, Lydia. You do not thank him for that. You might be surprised. Some men figure a marriage license gives them rights, not duties. His arm tightened around her. Then they are fools. A marriage ought to be a partnership, equal shares in everything. Anything else is not worth a dime. She leaned into him, feeling a safety she thought was gone forever. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Caleb said, his voice thick with feeling. Did not think I would ever say those words again. The seasons turned, as they always do. Summer's heat gave way to a crisp autumn, then a short, sharp winter. Lydia and Caleb worked the ranch side by side, their bond growing stronger with every sunrise. The ranch was thriving, and the neighbors, who were first just curious, now treated Lydia like one of their own. The same folks who stood by her at the hearing now saw her for who she was, not just Caleb's wife. She was a woman of true grit. By the time the wildflowers bloomed again in spring, Lydia was a changed person. The scared woman who ran through fire was gone. In her place was someone strong, someone who knew her own value and would not let anybody take it from her. One May evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Lydia took Caleb's hand and placed it on her belly, which was still flat. She watched his eyes as he understood. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice tight with hope and old hurt. "As sure as a person can be, maybe 2 months along." He pulled her close and buried his face in her hair, and she felt his tears. He was grieving what he lost and celebrating what they had found. "We will be careful," he finally said. "We will do everything right this time. We will do our best, Caleb. That is all anyone can ever do. Whatever comes, we will face it together." Together, he agreed, and sealed it with a kiss. The months passed easily. Lydia worked as long as she could, slowing down only when her body told her to. Caleb was a worrier at first, always hovering. Finally, she sat him down. "Caleb, I made it through Marcus Talbot, a hearing and learning to string barbed wire. I reckon I can handle carrying a baby. Trust me." And he did. He let her carry their child with strength, not fear. Martha Weaver came by often, bringing advice and helping Lydia prepare for the baby with a practical kindness that made all the difference. "You are going to be a fine mother," Martha said one day. "I hope so," Lydia replied. "I am scared to death I will mess it up. Every good mother feels that way. It is the ones who are not scared that you have to worry about." As her time drew near, Caleb got everything ready. He rode to town to make sure the midwife would come at a moment's notice. He even built a beautiful cradle out of cedar wood, sanding it perfectly smooth. The baby decided to come on a clear morning in October, 3 weeks early. The pains came on fast. Caleb moved with a calm purpose, saddling his horse to fetch the midwife and getting Lydia settled. "I am scared," she told him. "I know," he said, kissing her forehead. "But you are the strongest woman I have ever known. You can do this." The midwife, a kind woman named Mrs. Chen, arrived within 2 hours. The labor was a long haul, a full 14 hours of pain and praying. Lydia gripped Caleb's hand the whole time. But unlike his first wife's tragic birth, this one was hard but safe. At last, a baby girl came into the world, squalling and healthy. Lydia cried with pure exhaustion and joy. Caleb just stood there, staring at the tiny child in Mrs. Chen's arms, looking like he had seen a ghost and an angel all at once. "You have a daughter, Mr. Holt," the midwife said, wrapping her in a blanket. "A strong, healthy daughter." She placed the baby in Lydia's arms. Lydia looked at that little wrinkled face and felt a love so fierce it nearly broke her heart. They had made this life together, proof that something beautiful could rise from ashes. Caleb knelt by the bed, his hands shaking as he touched the baby's fist. Her tiny fingers wrapped right around his thumb. "What will we name her?" Lydia asked. Caleb looked from his wife to his new daughter. "Rose," he said, "for the daughter I lost, and Hope, because that is what she is. Rose Hope Holt." "Yes," Lydia whispered. "That is perfect." Mrs. Chen left the next morning, leaving the new family in a peaceful quiet. Caleb hardly slept, just watching over them both. "Come to bed," Lydia finally told him. "She is fine. I am fine." He slipped in beside her, careful not to hurt her. "I never thought I would have this again," he said quietly. "A family. You will not fail her, Caleb. This is not then. This is now. We have a healthy baby and a whole life to live. We cannot spend our lives looking over our shoulder for what we might lose. We just have to live." "When did you get to be so wise?" she heard him ask. She smiled. "The day I ran through a fire and found a man worth building a life with." Rose grew, and the ranch grew right along with her. They bought the Henderson place next door, and their herd of cattle doubled, then tripled. On their daughter's 3rd birthday, Lydia found Caleb sitting on the ridge that overlooked their land. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, handing him a cup of coffee. "About how different everything is," he said, gazing down at their home. 12 years ago, I thought I was building all this for Sarah, for the life she wanted, but maybe I was just building it without knowing who it was for. Lydia leaned her head on his shoulder. It was for us, Caleb. For this. Comes our way. For you, Caleb said gently. For the woman who showed up half dead on my porch and brought my whole world back to life. They sat quiet then, just watching the day begin. Their daughter played nearby while Martha watched over her. Between them was the home they had built. Not from dreams, but from desperation and honest work. A home made of respect that grew into a partnership and then into love. Later on, they planted a small oak tree out front. It would take a long, long time to grow, but it was their promise to a future they would build together. Rose helped with her toy shovel as Caleb set the new oak tree. Why plant it, Mama? She asked. Lydia smiled. Because some good things are worth waiting a long time for. Caleb lifted Rose onto his shoulders. We will all care for it. That is what families do. Hearing her daughter's sweet laughter, a deep peace finally settled in Lydia's heart. She had walked through fire to build this life from pure grit, and every single step had been worth it. This home was built on real love, not on lies and fear. Later that evening, after Rose was asleep, they sat on the porch. You think it will make it? Caleb asked, nodding toward the small tree. Lydia thought of the desperate woman who had collapsed right on this porch, running for her very life years ago. Then she thought of the strong woman she had become. Oh, it will last, she said, absolutely certain. We built it to last. Caleb took her hand as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky. That little tree was a promise, planted by a love that was just as strong and permanent. Lydia had run from death, but Caleb had given her a true home. By choosing to stop running and build something real, she had finally found herself. The fire was out. The past was behind her. Ahead was only the good life she had earned, a life that was, at long last, completely her own.